movable object named Etchells. Top fuel gets tighter as Coletta cracks the winner's circle. Morgan wins the battle now that WJ's won the war. And two-wheeler number 2 is number 1 in the heartland. From Raybestos Products in Crawfordsville, Indiana, these stories and more on this edition of NHRA Today. Whenever we ride along in our coverage of funny cars, you see a cloud of dust swirl around the cockpit as the car zips down the track. Well, it's called clutch dust, a fog formed by friction. Now, when you consider that the clutch is faced with forces powerful enough to turn metal into mist, you begin to realize that the clutch is one of the most critical components in drag racing. Fine-tuning the clutch is the key to today's quick times and fast speeds. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of NHRA Today. I'm Steve Evans. Virtually every clutch disc used in American racing begins its life right here at Raybestos, and we're going to show you how they're made. And interestingly enough, one of the prime ingredients is a form of dust. But more importantly, we have a half hour of highlights from one of the greatest national events ever held. Let's kick it off with What's Hot. Not only did Heartland Park see every one of its records broken at the Sears Craftsman Nationals, but a new national record was set in top fuel when Corey McClanathan blasted a quickest ever 4.762 elapsed time in round 2.
Eddie Hill's had that 477, and you know, we hold the record, but that 477 has been eaten and a monkey on my back for a long time, and it sure feels good to throw it away.
Not content with setting the elapsed time record, Corey Mack also attacked the 300-mile-an-hour barrier, breaking through with a 3:02 in round 3. Corey's was one of a half a dozen 300 runs in top fuel at Topeka, along with those by fellow first-timers Eddie Hill and Del Worsham. You get a big hug when you go 300. Not bad.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know which one's the best.
You've been wanting that.
Yeah, for a long time. And we weren't shooting for it then. I'm glad it came that way. Oh, it feels good.
In Division 5's top alcohol showdown, Randy Smith's dragster beat Denny Lucas. And there was a major upset in funny cars when Randy Anderson threw away certain victory by crossing the center line, giving an automatic win to dark horse Jim Farnsworth.
That's great. Dark Horse does good, huh? My sweetheart. All right.
And that's What's Hot. Folks, What's Hot was nothing more than a Topeka tease. The best is yet to come. But right now, let's start making a clutch disc. Remember the powder I showed you before? Well, they call that centered iron. It's got a little zinc and copper in it for seasoning, and it is swept into this press where 1,500 tons of pressure is applied. That's the equivalent of 10 locomotives stacked one on top of the other. That's pressure. Imagine what that press would do to your hand. You could use it for a spatula. All right, the centered iron powder is formed into this wafer. Whoops. Well, as you can see, it's not quite ready for the abuses of drag racing. You know, around here, they rely a lot on Warren Johnson's input. In fact, Raybestos is an associate sponsor on his Oldsmobile. Now, Warren enjoyed Topeka. Here's Dave's Pro Stock report.
At the Sears Craftsman Nationals, Pro Stock points leader Warren Johnson was poised to clinch his second Winston title. But there is a torrid points battle for second between Warren's son, Kurt, and Scott Jeffreyon.
It's going to be interesting, you know. We failed to qualify back at the Keystone, so it's going to be an uphill battle, but I think the Wayne County crew and myself are up to it.
There's 3 races left, 12 rounds of competition. There's 2,400 points available, so it's going to be a battle right to the end.
Kurt's hopes were dampened by a Friday qualifying crash, but with a little help from his friends, the Scribner brothers, he was soon back in the fight. In round 2, Kurt's borrowed Torco MPZ colors met up with Dad's GM Performance Parts Cutlass. In the near lane, Kurt cut the quicker light for a whole shot victory, which sent him on to the final 4, where he fell victim to number 4 qualifier David Rampy. David Rampy's opponent in the final round would be the winner of the race between Larry Morgan and Scott Jeffreyon. A win by Scott would allow him to close the gap in the Winston points chase. But Scott fouled by 4 thousandths of a second, wasting the quickest time of the round and giving the win to Larry Morgan's Castrol Super Queen Cutlass.
Yeah, it sure doesn't feel good, you know, but my lights have been close all day, and You win by the sword and you die by the sword out here.
In the final, Rampy took the initial lead, but the Winnebago Oles veered toward the wall while Morgan surged fast and on to his first national event win of the year.
It's about time, isn't it? I'll tell you, we've struggled, and we worked real hard to get here. There is nothing like it.
So the battle for second in the Winston Points chase will continue in Dallas, but the 1993 Pro Stock Champion banner will fly over Sugar Hill, Georgia.
Yeah, I think it's over right now. Just the way things have gone this afternoon, we had a little glitch in it. Kurt went and did exactly the same thing. It bit him, but fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which side of the fence you're on, I think we're the champion.
The Winston Pro Stock Bike Championship was all but decided at Topeka as Dave Schultz's Sunoco Suzuki in the far lane defeated John Meyer's bike, which had a bad case of the shakes on the top end. Looking at the points, with only the Winston finals remaining, it's Schultz and Myers with John Smith, Ron Ayers, and Paul Gast rounding out the top 5.
We're about to show you the key step in the manufacturing process of a racing clutch disc. This will be the center. It is high tensile strength steel with a copper coating that'll act kind of like a flux. All right, and this is the stacking furnace. So you got those powdered wafers, one, then a center, then a wafer, then a center. You can make over 30 clutch discs at a time. Now what we're doing here is building an oven. You come over here and you take this thing called a retort. You hook a crane up, you lower it over the stacking furnace. Now to finish off the oven, see that big blue cast iron thing? That's called a bell. You lower that over the top and you fire it up and cook them for 2 hours at 1,550 degrees. It's kind of like making fudge. It makes those powdery particles want to stick to one another. And this past weekend in Topeka, funny car racers, using clutch discs made just this way, were trying to rotate the earth. Dave?
The Sears Craftsman Nationals may go down in history as the greatest weekend in funny car competition. Before second round qualifying on Friday, John Force and his sponsor, Castrol, got the fireworks started by posting a $25,000 bounty for the first driver to break into the fours.
This really looks good for a car to run in the fours here. Between here and Dallas, I really believe it's going to happen. If not by myself, by somebody. And they were in a big discussion. I said, wait a minute. I said, I believe I can do it. And if I can, I'll put up half of it. I'm a little sick about making that statement.
But some drivers, like Chuck Etchells, remained skeptical.
I told Force, I said, you know, we always knew you were sneaky. But he waited till we were all setting up here in the staging lanes, and the crew chiefs made their decision. And I looked at Richards, he said, I don't have a 4 in this car.
Force's hopes of pocketing his own change were dashed when a broken brake caliper sent the Castrol Cutlass back to the pits. But 2 runs later, Chuck Etchells proved his own prediction incorrect as the Kendall car picked the pocket of the Castrol pilot in 4.98 seconds.
It's just a milestone. I think it's going to stand for a long time. What can you say? I'm speechless.
Despite Chuck's record run, he was never able to back it up, while Force had some small consolation by running a 5.03 to lower his own national record.
We're excited with that. I know the first, second run was what everybody dreamed about, and the hype's not there for being the national record holder, but the fans have to look that we backed that up.
Force's only remaining wish was to be the first to break the 300-mile-an-hour barrier in a funny car. But in the first round of eliminations, Jim Epler's Rug Doctor Cutlass in the near lane shattered John's dream with an historic 300.04-mile-an-hour run.
So I had to take a little of Etchells' thunder from 300 miles an hour in a funny car. Who would have ever thought it?
After all that excitement, the championship round turned out to be a battle between the 2 quickest funny cars in the world, with Chuck Etchells holding lane choice over John Force. Chuck selected his record-setting far lane, and despite Force's quicker reaction time, the Kendall Dodge flew past to pick John's pocket once again.
It's been a career weekend for me. I've never experienced anything like this in my life. And, you know, it's just, we couldn't ask for any more. We got probably more than we deserved.
Force remains atop the Winston point standings, but Chuck Etchells' performance takes second from Cruz Pedregon, while Al Hoffman and Tom Hoover round out the top 5.
Well, here they are, kind of like cookies out of Grandma's oven, our semi-finished clutch discs. Now they come over to the race shop for 3 machining operations, all stacked up here and ready to go on the dry grinder, where they are precision ground for thickness and parallelism. Very important. Then the second machine chamfers the edges of the disc on both sides, and then they move to the third and final manufacturing process here at Raybestos. The key slots are cut, which allow for heat expansion and a certain amount of flexibility in the disc.
Castrol presents the GTX Pipeline.
the latest news from the world of drag racing.
Kansas is justifiably proud of the fine facilities at Heartland Park. And no one is prouder than the state's #1 drag racing fan, who just happens to be the state's #1 elected official, Governor Joan Feeney. She rolled out the red carpet at Topeka, hosting reception for drag racers at the governor's mansion and popping up all over the track during the weekend.
I look forward to it every year. So we have, they come out and we have dinner, and it's very relaxed. We don't have anything formal, but just want them to feel at home here in Kansas.
Whether rubbing elbows with the racers or taking in the view from the tower, Governor Feeney made it clear that drag racing is as much a part of Kansas culture as wind or wheat.
Hi, guess what? 308 miles an hour I went. I'm serious.
Central Indiana. Here at Raybestos, they make clutch discs in different diameters and thicknesses, but one thing they all have in common: they all go through a Rockwell check, and that is simply a machine that tells you how hard material is. And here the range on the Rockwell scale is 40 to about 80. The alcohol racers, they like a softer compound. The Top Fuel guys, they're more towards the 80 scale. You know, and I was just thinking, through that very machine went the 4 clutch discs that sent Corey Mack to a national ET record. Little did it know. But who won at Topeka? Here's Dave McClellan to tell us.
With 3 races to go, the Sears Craftsman Nationals represented the last hope for some drivers' Winston title aspirations. If Top Fuel star Kenny Bernstein had any chance of catching points leader Eddie Hill, Topeka meant do or die.
I think it's been do or die all year the way Eddie's been running, but you're right. We're down to 3 to go, and the Budweiser King's going to have to win all 3 and hope that Eddie falters in all 3. So that's a tough assignment, especially this year when we haven't been as consistent as we like to be.
Kenny's quest began in round 1, where he met the commercial metal fabricators dragster of Pat Dakin. But Bernstein overpowered the far lane, sending his title hopes up in smoke.
That's the way it goes. Congratulations to Eddie Hill for doing a great job this year of being consistent. We just not consistent enough.
Bernstein's misfortune should have opened the door for Hill to clinch the crown. But in round 2, the Pennzoil Nuclear Banana lost grip at the green, giving a final 4 berth to Del Worsham in his 300-mile-an-hour Whiskey Pete's Prima Donna's entry.
We need some more rounds, and I'd sure like to get one more win.
In the final 4, Del Worsham fell victim to Scott Coletta's American International Airways machine, Scott being the only other contender for the Winston Championship. His opponent in the final round was the #1 qualifier, Corey McLenithan. In the near lane, Corey had the slightly quicker reaction time, but the Mack attack was no match with the world record 308.64 mile-an-hour charge of first-time Top Fuel winner Scott Coletta.
It's unbelievable. 308. I mean, where that came from, I don't know, but I hope we don't forget where we found it.
So the Winston Top Fuel Points Championship remains undecided. Eddie Hill stays in the lead, while Scott Coletta leaps past Kenny Bernstein for 2nd, Mike Dunn remains 4th, and Rance McDaniel jumps from 8th to 5th.
Records seem to fall in the near lane at Topeka, not only for top alcohol dragster Keith Stark with the quickest ET ever, but also for Pat Austin, whose top alcohol funny car set speed and ET records. A far cry from her last time here, when racers at the Western Auto Nationals complained that a bump in the same lane had turned Heartland Park into a 1-lane track. After that race, Heartland's Jim Tomes put his nose to the grindstone and ground down the bump.
We came in after the event with the diamond tip concrete grinder, took the bump out, went in with the surface grinder, smoothed it out, blended it all back in, and no more bump.
Stopping a 190-mile-an-hour Pro Stock car at the finish line can be quite a task. And earlier this year, we saw a number of drivers have serious accidents while trying to do just that. Well, Pro Stock driver and car builder Jerry Haas is working with a company that's going to try and fix that problem. They have developed an anti-lock brake system for use in Pro Stock racing. Unlike the passenger car anti-lock brake systems, which are electronic in nature, that are reactive systems, this is a proactive system. The anti-lock brake systems, electronic ones, are not allowed for use in Pro Stock drag racing. This system has this accumulator that goes between the master cylinder and the brake caliper itself. What this does is it equalizes the pressure from side to side on both the front and the rear of the brakes on the Pro Stock car. It's supposed to make them stop a lot straighter no matter how hard the driver presses on the brakes. It's going to be a welcome addition to Pro Stock drag racing.
Well, no one had a lock on sportsman racing at Topeka. Here's a list of the winners from the Sears Craftsman Nationals. Congratulations, one and all. Now, nobody in drag racing knows the importance of brakes more than bracket racers. And here's our clutch player, Bob Fry, with a report on the Firestone TNN Finals in Divisions 1 and 4.
Back in the early days of drag racing, nearly every racer gave his car its own personality with a nickname. With the evolution of sponsorship, the major portions of cars now have some kind of logo promoting a business or product. But some ET racers who haven't landed a sponsor yet keep the tradition alive and well. At the Division 1 Firestone TNN ET Racing Tournament, we found a lot of names in the Maple Grove pits. For instance, there must have been some accountants or bankers racing here because there were several names that had to do with money. Some names had to do with movies or TV, cartoons, and even dinosaurs. There were some that didn't need an explanation, while others we had to ask.
I call it abracadabra because now you see it, now you don't.
We call our car until autumn because we race until that time, because when snow flies, it's a little bit hard to hook up in the snow.
Now here's one, make it or break it. And from the looks of where it's parked, I'd say he broke it. Some racers use the state of mind approach to try to psych out the competition.
The car's name used to be the Intimidator, and when I had my shirts printed up, the man made a mistake and it made the car name look like the Whoopster, which was a name that friends of mine gave me when I was racing. So it was a lot easier to change the vinyl letters on the race car to the Whoopster than it was to change 50 t-shirts.
Unfortunately for Hal, he was whooped in the first round. Oh well, I guess it's back to the printer. As this race continued under the lights, the wet stuff hit with only about 50 cars left. The eliminations continued on Sunday with these results. The Firestone TNN tournament in Division 4 was also held last weekend at Houston Raceway Park. There, too, cars were lettered with some names to remember. Most had to do with the driver's profession. You could almost guess that this car belonged to a policeman, this one to a dentist, and this one to a teacher's spouse. Like their northeastern counterparts, we had to ask about some of the other names.
Rough cut. That comes from people asking me what kind of lights you've been cutting, and I tell them, well, it's kind of rough. And they just hung that nickname on me, Rough Cut.
A friend where I worked had a motor scooter with the wild hair on it, and I was wanting a name, and he said, well, put the wild hair on it.
There's a comedian, and he has his pants always sagging real low. His name's Droopy Drawers, what he does on the stage, and we named it after him.
I guess you could say Richard was really feeling droopy after his loss, but he wasn't the only one of our named cars to go down. But that didn't keep the finals from being really exciting. In the pro final, Scott, don't call me Jesse, James, took this close win over Bobby Shaddix in the near lane, but not before some tense moments at the start line.
During the last round, I was sitting there after I'd done my burnout. My oil pressure light come on. I was sitting in the lanes. I was praying to God. I was sitting there before I said, I was going, God, please give me some oil pressure, and it come back up.
Now here are the rest of the winners from Division 4. For NHRA Today, I'm Bob. People call me lots of names, Fry.
For all of us here at NHRA Today, I'm Steve Evans. See you then.
NHRA Today is a presentation of Diamond B Sports.